Global Marketing, Chapter number 4, Social and Cultural Environments. Introduction. Having an understanding of culture can actually become a firm's competitive advantage. To do this, we must overcome our prejudices that are a natural result of the human tendency towards ethnocentricity. Cultural factors challenge global marketeers because many are hidden from their view. In order to do this, the chapter will look at culture from several different conceptual frameworks that include Hall's notion of high and low cultural contexts, Maslow's hierarchy, Hofstede's cultural typology, the self-reference criterion, and diffusion theory. Tasks of global marketeers. The task of global marketeers is to study and understand the cultures of countries in which they will be doing business. It is their job to understand how an unconscious reference to their own cultural values or self-reference criterion may influence their perception of the market. Their role incorporates this understanding into the marketing planning process. Society, culture, and global consumer cultures. There are different aspects of cultures. Culture is acted out in social institutions or society. Culture are ways of living built up by a group of human beings that are transmitted from one generation to the other. Culture has both conscious and unconscious values, ideas, attitudes, and symbols. Culture is both physical, which can include clothing and tools and buildings, and non-physical, for example, religion, attitudes, beliefs, and values. Social institutions comprise of family, education, religion, government, business. These institutions function to reinforce the cultural norms. Material and non-material culture. Material and non-material elements of culture are interrelated. Cultural universals include athletic sports, body ornaments, cooking, courtship, dancing, decorative art, education, ethics, etiquettes, family festing, food taboos, language, marriage, mealtime, medicine, mourning, music, property rights, religious rituals, residence rules, status differences, and trade. The physical component of physical culture includes clothing, tools, decorative art, body ornaments, homes. Most of these are tangible things. Subjective or abstract culture includes religion, perception, attitudes, beliefs, and values. Society, culture, and global consumer culture. Gerard Hofstede says, culture is the collective programming of the mind that distinguishes the members of one category of people from those of another. A nation, an ethnic group, a gender group, an organization, or a family may be considered as a category. Because of technologies such as internet, cell phones, and other communication channels, marketeers have begun to see the emergence of global consumers. The hallmark of this culture is consumption. As the world becomes more interconnected and as cultural imagery continues to freely flow across national boundaries, it can be expected that this culture will grow. It can be exploited by global consumer cultural positioning. Global consumer cultures are emerging. Global consumers are persons who share meaningful sets of consumptions related symbols such as coffee culture, fast food culture, or credit card culture. Primarily, the global consumer is a product of technologically interconnected world. Attitudes, beliefs, and values. By accepting Hofstede's definition of culture, that is, the collective programming of mind, it would make sense to learn about culture by studying attitudes, beliefs, and values shared by a specific group of people. Attitude is learned tendency to respond in a consistent way to a given object or entity. Belief is an organized pattern of knowledge that an individual holds to be true about the world. Value is enduring belief or feeling that a specific mode of conduct is personally or socially preferable to another mode of conduct. Values represent the deepest level of a culture and are shared by the majority of members. Within any culture, there are likely to be subcultures, that is, smaller group of people with their own shared subset of attitudes, beliefs, and values. Subcultures may represent attractive niche marketing opportunities, for example, vegetarian. Japanese values include striving for cooperation, consensus, self-denial, and harmony. A Japanese belief is that they are unique in the world. Japanese youth believes that the West is an important source of fashion trends. Therefore, many Japanese share a favorable attitude towards American brands. Religion. McDonald's does not serve beef hamburgers in India because Hindus do not eat beef. Similarly, McDonald's does not offer bacon in Muslim countries because Muslims do not eat bacon and pork. The world's major religions include Buddhism, Hinduism, Islam, Judaism, and Christianity, and are an important source of beliefs, attitudes, and values. Religious tenets, practices, holidays, and history impacts global marketing activities. Aesthetics. Aesthetics is the sense of what is beautiful and what is not beautiful. It represents good taste as opposed to tastelessness or even obscenity. Visual aesthetics is embodied in the color or shape of a product, label, or package. Aesthetic styles represents various degree of complexity which are perceived differently around the world. Aesthetic elements that are seen as attractive in one country may be viewed differently in another. Aesthetics and colors. Some colors may be used in all countries. For example, caterpillar yellow or jet blue. Colors may need to be adapted according to the local cultural preferences. Soft drink labels and colors associate with good taste. Chinese associate with brown. South Koreans and Japanese associate with yellow. Americans associate with red. Red associated with blood, winemaking, activity, heat, and vibrancy in many countries, but is poorly received in some African countries. White identified with purity and cleanliness in the West, but with death in parts of Asia. Gray means inexpensive in Japan and China, but high quality and expensive in the US. Dietary preferences. Despite local preferences, there is evidence that global dietary preferences are converging. When time pressed families do not have time to prepare meals, fast food became more popular. Young people experiment with different foods. Global tourism has exposed people to pizza, pasta, and other ethnic foods. Shorter work hours and tighter budgets are forcing workers to find a place to grab a quick, cheap bite before returning to work. Domino's Pizza pulled out of Italy because its products were seen as too American with bold tomato sauce and heavy toppings. Subway had to educate Indians about the benefits of sandwiches because they do not normally eat bread. Language and communication. Words can have different meanings in different cultures. Syntax, rule of sentence formation. English has relatively fixed word orders. On the other hand, Russian has relatively free word orders. Consider the use of the word please. In our own Pakistani culture, if we have to ask for something, we say, can I please have this pen? Can I please have a glass of water? However, in the British culture, they put please at the end of the sentence. So it would be, can I have a glass of water, please? That is syntax. Semantics, system of meanings. Japanese words convey nuances of feeling for which other languages lack exact correlations. Yes and no can be interpreted differently than in other languages. Phonology, system of sound patterns. Japanese does not distinguish between the sound of I and R. English and Russian both have I and R sounds. In the culture of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, usually there is no difference between the sound of V and W. Morphology, word formation. Russian is a highly inflected language with 6 different case endings for nouns and adjectives. English has fewer inflections. By inflections we mean ing that comes at the end of a word, or a ive that comes at the end of a word, or a ed that comes at the end of a word. Language and communication. We must pay close attention not only to what we hear but also to what we see while conducting business in other countries. Speaking English around the globe. There are more people who speak English as a foreign language than native speakers. 85% of European teenagers study English. Sony, Nokia, Mitsubishi require managers to speak English. Non-verbal communication. Westerners tend to be verbal. Asians value non-verbal communication. In Japan, Boeing has many nuances. In many countries around the world, we should not show the sole of shoes or pass documents with the left hand. Marketing's impact on culture. Universal aspects of cultural environment represent opportunities to standardize elements of a marketing program. Increasing travel and improved communications have contributed to a convergence of tastes and preferences in a number of product categories. The astute global marketeer often discovers that much of the apparent cultural diversity in the world turns out to be different ways of accomplishing the same thing. Widespread shared preference for for convenience food, disposable products, popular music, and movies in the United States, Europe, and Asia suggests that many consumer products have broad, even universal appeal. The cultural change and globalization of culture have been capitalized upon and even significantly accelerated by companies that have seized opportunities to find customers around the world. High context and low context cultures. High context. In high context cultures, information resides in the context. There is an emphasis on background, basic values, and societal status. There is less emphasis on legal paperwork, and there is a strong focus on personal reputation. Countries like Saudi Arabia and Japan have high context cultures. Low context cultures. In low context cultures, messages are explicit and specific. Words carry all information. There is a reliance on legal paperwork. There is a focus on non personal documentation of credibility. Countries like Switzerland, United States, and Germany have low context cultures. In high context cultures, lawyers are less important, whereas in low context cultures, they are more important. In a high context culture, a person's word is his or her bond. In low context culture, there is more reliance on the writing. In high context cultures, the responsibility of organizational error is taken by the highest level. In low context culture, the responsibility of organizational error is pushed to the lowest level. In high context cultures, space has little importance. People breathe on each other, whereas in low context culture, people maintain their private space. In high context culture, time is managed in a polysynchronic way. That is, people like to do multitasking. In low context culture, people are monochronic, whereby they only do one thing at a time. In high context culture, competitive bidding is infrequent. In low context culture, the competition is usually very high and common. Hofstede's cultural typology. Gerard Hofstede's cultural typology includes power distance, individual versus collectivism, masculinity versus femininity, uncertainty avoidance, long term versus short term orientation. This is Gerard Hofstede. These are his cultural dimensions. We will be talking about four of them. One you have to cover on your own. The first cultural dimension of Hofstede is power distance. Power distance is the extent to which less powerful members of institutions and organizations accept that power is distributed unequally. In high power distance countries, people may obey orders blindly and are less likely to question authority. Companies tend to be centralized in their decision making and usually have tall organizational structures with lots of hierarchies in them. In low power distance countries, organizations are flatter and decentralized. There is a smaller ratio of supervisors. Employees are more likely to question their bosses, and the management style is usually more participative. The second dimension of Hofstede's cultural dimension is individualism versus collectivism. Gerard Hofstede explains individualism as the tendency of people to look after themselves and their immediate family only. Countries high in individualism have high individual initiatives. The promotions there are based on achievements and salaries are based on market value. In collectivism, there is a tendency of people to belong to groups or collectives and look after each other in exchange of loyalty. Countries high in collectivism have low individual initiatives, salaries and promotions are based on seniority. Uncertainty avoidance. According to Hofstede, uncertainty avoidance is the extent to which people feel threatened by ambiguous or unclear situation and have created beliefs and institutions that try to avoid such situations. High uncertainty avoidance means low risk taking. People have a high need for security in such cultures. There is a strong belief in experts and their knowledge. There are more written rules and procedures, and managers do not like to take risks. In low uncertainty avoidance countries, people are more willing to accept the risks associated with the unknown. There are fewer written rules and procedures, more risk taking by the managers, higher employee turnover, and more ambitious employees. The next cultural dimension of Hofstede is masculinity and femininity. Masculinity. According to Hofstede, the masculine cultures have dominant social values of success, money, and things. Countries high in masculinity place greater importance on earnings, recognition, achievement, challenge, and wealth, and usually the jobs in these cultures are of high stress. Femininity. In feminine cultures, the dominant social values are of caring for one another and quality of life. Countries high in femininity place greater importance in cooperation, friendly atmosphere, employment security, and the natural environment. Jobs usually in these cultures are less stressful. The last dimension of Hofstede is long term orientation and short term orientation, which I request you to learn on your own. The next model of culture was presented by Trompenar. According to Trompenar, the first dimension of culture is universalism versus particularism. In universal cultures, there is a belief that ideas and practices can be applied everywhere in the world without modification. People tend to focus on formal rules and accept business partners to do the same. However, cultures who practice particularism, there is a belief that circumstances dictate how ideas and practices should be applied, and some things cannot be done the same way everywhere. People tend to focus on relationships, working things out to suit those involved. The second dimension of Trompenar is neutral versus emotional cultures. In neutral cultures, people hold back their emotions. People try not to show their feelings. In emotional cultures, people express their emotions openly and naturally. People smile, they talk loudly, greet each other with enthusiasm, and show happiness or unhappiness. The third cultural dimension of Trompenar is achievement versus ascription. In achievement cultures, people are accorded status based on how well they perform their work and what they have accomplished, for example, through their job, work performance, education, etc. In ascription cultures, the status is attributed based on who or what a person is. For example, based on their age, gender, family, tribe, ethnic group, etc. The fourth cultural dimension of Trompenar is the use of time. Sequential use of time. Here, people do one thing at a time. They like to keep appointments strictly and follow plans to the letter. Synchronous use of time. In such cultures, people do more than one thing at a time, and appointments are usually approximated. The final cultural dimensions of Trompenar include inner directed versus outer directed. In inner directed cultures, people believe in controlling environmental outcomes and think that they can control what happens to them. In outer directed cultures, people believe in allowing things to take their natural course and living in harmony with the nature. People are less likely to believe that they can control what happens to them. Self reference criterion and perception. Unconscious reference to one's own cultural values creates cultural myopia. How to reduce cultural myopia? Define the problem or goal in terms of home country's cultural traits. Define the problem in terms of host country's cultural traits. Make no value judgments. Isolate the self-reference criteria influence and examine it. Redefine the problem without the self-reference criterion influence and solve for the host country situation. Diffusion theory. The adoption process. The adoption process is defined as the mental stages through which an individual passes through time of his or her first knowledge of an innovation to the time of product adoption or purchase. These include awareness, interest, evaluation, trial, and adoption. Awareness. In this stage, the consumer becomes aware for the first time of the product or innovation. An important early communication objective in global marketing is to create awareness of new product through general exposure of advertising messages. Impersonal sources of information are most important at this stage. Interest. During this stage, the consumer is interested enough to learn more. The consumer has focused his or her attention on communication related to product and will engage in research activities and seek out additional information. Evaluation. The individual mentally assesses the product's benefit in relation to present and anticipated future needs and based on this judgment decides whether or not to try it. Trial. Most consumers will not purchase expensive products without a hands-on experience marketers call trial. A good example of a product trial that does not involve purchase is the automobile test drive. Adoption. At this point, the individual either makes an initial purchase or continues to purchase and adopts and exhibits brand loyalty. Diffusion theory characteristics of innovation. Innovation is something new. Five factors that affect the rate at which innovations are adopted include relative advantage, compatibility, complexity, divisibility, and communicability. Relative advantage. How a new product compares to existing products or methods in the eyes of consumers is known as relative advantage. The perceived relative advantage of a new product versus existing product is a major influence on the rate of adoption. If a product has substantial relative advantage over its competition, it is likely to gain quick acceptance. For example, when we move from CDs to USBs. Compatibility. The extent to which a product is consistent with existing values and past experiences of adopters. The history of innovations in international marketing is replete with failures caused by the lack of compatibility of new products in the target market. Complexity. The degree to which an innovation or new product is difficult to understand and use. Product complexity is a factor that can slow down the rate of adoption, particularly in developing country markets with low literacy rates. Divisibility. The degree to which a product can be tried and used on a limited basis without great expense. Communicability, the degree to which the benefits of an innovation or value of a product may be communicated to a potential market. Diffusion theory adopters categories. There are 5 categories of adopters: innovators, early majority, late majority, and laggards. Innovators are the first 2.5% of individuals to adopt an innovation. They are adventurous, comfortable with high degree of complexity and uncertainty, and typically have access of substantial financial resources. Early adopters are the next 13.5% to adopt the innovation. They are well integrated into the social system and have great potential for opinion leadership. Other potential adopters look at the early adopters for information and advice. Thus, early adopters make excellent missionaries for new products or processes. Early majority are the next 34%. They adopt innovations slightly before the average member of the social system. They are typically not opinion leaders, but they interact frequently with their peers. Late majority are the next 34%. They approach innovation with a skeptical air and may not adopt innovation until they feel the pressure from their peers. They may have scarce resources. Laggards are the last 16%. They base their decision primarily on past experiences and possess almost no opinion leadership. They are highly skeptical of innovation and innovators and must feel certain that the new innovation will not fail prior to adopting it. Marketing implications. Cultural factors must be considered when marketing consumer and industrial products. Environmental sensitivity reflects the extent to which products must be adapted to the specific cultural needs of different national markets. Environmental sensitivity is a useful approach to view products because it places them on a continuum. At one end of the continuum are environmentally insensitive products that do not require significant adoption of the environment at various world markets. On the other end of the continuum are products that are highly sensitive to different environmental factors. A company with environmental insensitive products will spend relatively less time determining the specific and unique conditions of local market because the product is basically universal. The greater a product's environmental sensitivity, the greater the need for managers to address country-specific economic, regulatory, technological, social, and cultural environmental conditions. Environmental sensitivity. The horizontal axis shows environmental sensitivity, the vertical axis the degree to which a product adoption is needed. A product exhibiting low levels of environmental sensitivity, integrated circuits, for example, belongs to lower left of the figure. Intel has sold more than 100 million microprocessors because a chip is a chip everywhere around the world. Moving to the right on the horizontal axis, the level of sensitivity increases, as does the amount of adoption. Computers are characterized by moderate levels of environmental sensitivity. Variations in country voltage requirements requires some degree of adaptation. In addition, the computer software documentation should be in the local language. At the upper right are products with high environmental sensitivity. Food sometimes falls into this category because it is sensitive to climate and culture. Environmental sensitivity. Independent of social class and income, culture is a significant influence on consumption and purchasing. Food is the most culturally sensitive category of consumer goods. This marks the end of unit number 4. Thank you.